21 handling errors, 13 penalties conceded and 30 missed tackles are just some of the statistics that paint a picture of how far off the pace Ireland were last Friday night against the All Blacks. Andy Farrell's men suffered a 23 points to 13 defeat to open their autumn series with a loss. And on today's episode of The Left Wing, we'll be reflecting on all the talking points from last Friday, as well as across the weekend and what was a pretty exciting international rugby weekend to open up the November series. I'm Will Slattery, and I'm delighted to be joined in studio by Cian, Tracey and Luke Fitzgerald. And Cian, I touched on a few of the numbers there. There was a few other ugly ones that we'll probably get to in time, but obviously Ireland versus the All Blacks, a lot of people thought it was going to be a one-score close game. For me, leaving the result aside, it was the performance and how far off, as I mentioned in the intro, Ireland were from their usual standards that had me very, very surprised.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned it was a great weekend all round, Will, for rugby, but the Ireland-New Zealand game was probably the worst of them, arguably, particularly the build-up that it got. I thought New Zealand were full value for their victory, but I think they were there for the taking. I think that's what will be probably the most frustrating thing from Andy Farrell's view. But it was one of those games where we obviously had the chat afterwards in the podcast, and you kind of have your initial reactions. And I actually, when I watched it back, I thought it was worse than what I thought at the time live. Just so poor. I still can't put my finger on why there were so many errors. Look, there are excuses there, mitigating factors, whatever you want to say, that it was their first hit out of the season, all this kind of crack. But think back to how well they started in Marseille at the start of the Six Nations. It hasn't been an issue in the past. So, you threw out a few of the numbers there, Will. 0 bench impact. That's one that you could probably say as well, and definitely a key talking point.
I'd say they had a big impact, but it was all negative.
Negative, yeah.
It was a huge impact.
Exactly. One thing that really jumped out to me watching it back was the 36 minutes that Ireland went without scoring a point after Jack Crowley's conversion for Josh van der Fleer's try. I counted 18 errors in that period, so they were basically averaging an error every 2 minutes, which is shocking for an Irish team who I would say pride themselves on things like discipline, just like basic skills. And it wasn't just one player having a mare, it was like guys throwing passes to grounds, making really silly decisions at the breakdown, like really basic knock-ons as well. So you're right, when the bench came on, I think they actually ended up spreading panic, if anything, into the team at all, and that's not obviously what you want from your bench. So a couple of days on from it, I'm still scratching my head and wondering, is it a blip? Is it something more concerning? I am inclined to give them certainly not a free pass, but I do think they have credit in the bank. Like, their previous game was winning down in South Africa. They won the Six Nations, albeit it wasn't always fluid and convincing, but they did win in France this year as well. And I think what happens on Friday night will tell a lot about the team, even allowing for the fact that the All Blacks game was the big game of the month.
Yeah, there's a couple of big picture things you mentioned that I want to bring up with both of you. But first, just your kind of initial impressions. Like, what did you take away from that performance? Like, as Cian mentioned, handling was off, the discipline was very poor, the line-out creaked again. A lot of stuff went wrong on Friday.
Yeah, I think it was a bad night for me. That was it. We talked last week about, you'd love to have had that match as the second match of the. I think it was more fitting of a second match, so that because I was interviewing Justin Marshall before the game, and both of us were kind of saying, I wonder, what the impact of New Zealand having had a long season, Friday night, kind of shorter turnaround, etc. And then the flip side is obviously Ireland, won't have played. Will they come out fresh? Will they be fizzing? What was going to transpire off the back of that? Were New Zealand going to be tired? Were Ireland not going to be up to scratch? And as it turned out, I actually didn't think both teams played that well. I thought New Zealand definitely were worthy winners. I mean, they had all the territory, they had all the possession. But I think my key takeaway from it was that that's not a good New Zealand team, and a good New Zealand team would have put 30 on Ireland that night. I thought Ireland were shocking. I thought the handling was very, very poor. And once that kind of, I think when that team is kind of built off brilliant handling to me and really good. I thought their ruck was poor as well. I didn't think they got done there again. I thought they got done in the quarter final against New Zealand, but I thought they got done again on Friday night at the ruck. I thought New Zealand were played way smarter there, managed the referee better there as well. I think Ireland probably got a little bit lucky about that, with Jordy Bark going off the pitch. I think they looked like they weren't in that game at all. They got a little bit of life before half time, and then they got that try after half time, and I thought it probably masked, how poorly they were playing. So look, I think it's, to my mind, it's one that you just scratch off. You get the learnings from it, and you probably move on. I think that game deserved, Ireland having had one game before that. I think usually as well, you'd have had some cup games before this. I think they probably missed a little bit of that. You'd love to have seen them not having come in. There's a massive step up from league to cup and then to international from that. And I think that's a big step that probably they missed coming into this. They just look very, very cold to me. It's Doris talked after the game about them having had some brilliant sessions, but it's very, very different, to coming into playing the All Blacks, who are battle hardened. I think the temptation is to overcomplicate it, and I think that's probably not. I think you can look at that and just say, I thought the poor handling and the bad decision making and the poor execution at ruck time really kind of bled into the rest of the game, and I thought they didn't defend well at key times either. Panicked early and gave away penalties, and I think the way
30 missed tackles is
but they defended really poorly. Some of the stuff that I don't love about that system, you could see coming through, time and again. I really think that there's a skills deficit when you're down numbers in the modern game. I thought England showed it on the weekend as well. No one seems to be able to defend numbers down. They just keep running out. Like you saw Lowe, had Beelum inside him and never called him out wider. And then just rushes up and creates kind of a 2-on-1 now. I thought Keenan did very well to drag him down, but even once Keenan drags them down, that's how they get picked apart.
Get, so narrow there.
So narrow, but if you're going to be narrow, and that's something that Andy Farrell does from time to time, you've got to get up off the line. So I've covered everything. I know I feel like I have it boiled down to one or two things, but I've kind of expanded on that. But they just had a really bad night, Will. I think that was what it is. And I think they just need to pick themselves back up quickly now.
So do you think it was just a bad night? If you take this season in its totality, they've lost 3 matches. The last time they lost 3 games in a year was 2020, which was Andy Farrell's first year in charge. So you're going back a long time. 3 defeats this year, that's more than the same amount they had in 22 and 23 combined. So it's a stark difference in the results alone. And as you touched on there, they won the Six Nations, but they kind of broke the back of that championship week 1, and it got progressively less impressive performance-wise as it went along. People are putting the boot into England a lot for how they finish out games. The only game they actually managed to win in that scenario was against Ireland, whose game management was even worse that day. They obviously split in South Africa in the summer, which was an impressive achievement. But after the first test, Andy Farrell, as is now well known, read the riot act because he was so unhappy with the performance. So the performance levels over the year, and I take Luke's point, bit of rustiness, albeit these guys have played a lot of rugby, certainly the Leinster players, more than they probably would ordinarily in terms of what they've gotten at club level.
League is very different.
I know, but the handling,
the quality of
the handling shouldn't matter. The handling shouldn't be that bad, no matter how many matches you play.
It does. Well, everything is happening. So there's a spill of rain before. It's very different coming up against an All Black defence versus coming up against a Connacht defence.
And some of those were under no pressure.
But
some of those were blooper reel knockouts.
Definitely
under no pressure.
No, definitely. But
were any of them actually in traffic? Maybe 1 or 2, but not really.
But even if they're not, it's in the Aviva. It's different to playing the sports grounds.
The point about the provincial form, someone made this to me after the match at the weekend. And look, Munster obviously in disarray. Connacht have been hot and cold. Ulster the same. Leinster have obviously won all their games. But I would say, who have they played? I think a lot's been read into, not to go down a total rabbit hole here, but about Leinster's unbeaten start. I don't think they've come up against a very good team yet. So the jury is still out there. But I would agree with both of you. Some of the errors were obviously really poor, but they looked like a team who just hadn't played together in a long time. There were certain guys who were seriously short of game time. You look at Ronan Keller, Rob Herring, these kind of guys. And I wonder how much that played into it. You touched on the defence. Look, I know Ireland play a similar system under Simon Easterby, but it's not as aggressive as the majority of the Leinster players are playing under Jacques Nienaber. And I would imagine that is a very tough... You would know a lot more about it, Luke, but... Is that hard to go from this ultra aggressive defence that you're playing week in, week out, and then switching it by, not going as aggressive? And I was looking at the try as well when they got caught narrow and wondering, are guys kind of caught between two stools, between, am I in the Leinster mode here or am I in the Ireland mode? Because for all, he was actually one of those guys who got caught short, I thought. Yeah,
and I think it's a good question. I think sometimes it can be Like, but I'd say it's, even though it's kind of less hard up than Ninabar's system, everyone's kind of doing the same thing now. You know, my big concern is that teams don't seem to be able to do it, or most of the teams now don't seem to be able, particularly the wide players, do not seem to be able to defend well when they're not going to be able to cut off the pass. They just keep coming forward, and like, if you know, it happened twice in that kind of phase of play for the Will Jordan try at the end. But I think Leinster have been split using that. They've been split quite a few times this year as well. I don't think they defended great either. I've voiced some concerns on the podcast over that. I just don't love the system. I don't love it. I like it against bad teams. I don't love it against good teams. I think he gets split a few times in the game, and I think a really good New Zealand team would have split Ireland a few more times, if I'm being completely honest. I thought they had a load of errors as well. You know, kind of uncharacteristic ones. It was difficult conditions too. But I don't see that as much of an excuse, because they're still coming fairly hard up, Cian, you know. And I think if you were going from a Joe Schmidt system, where if you think about, you know, how they managed Ireland in the quarter final, where they really you know, if they were down numbers, they waited. They kind of went a little bit more traditional. They waited till they were numbers on, then they kind of hit Ireland, and they really slowed the ruck down and got back into that hard off the line from the next one. I think that would be an excuse for the Irish, you know, for how Ireland defended. But I think it's only a small variation into camp, and they've had 10 days to kind of practice it. You know, like defence is still the easiest thing to get right, or to get right quickly. In my mind, it's not that complicated. You know.
Yeah, like a couple of players, they were saying, you know, this is, I suppose, the quote-unquote problem when a team like Ireland goes away for a couple of weeks and trains in Portugal. No one really knows what's going on over there. And certainly before at Andy Farrell's press conference on Thursday, I wasn't actually there because I was at the All Blacks one, which is at the same time. But there was a couple of people saying he was a little bit tetchy even on that. Or sorry, it would have been the Wednesday last week around the team announcement.
Someone called the Lions a jolly, I think.
A jolly, yeah, but he'd also been asked about to be fair, I think it might have been Peter O'Reilly off the top of my head, asked about the makeup of the bench and, you know, like where the young guys gone. And look, I know we're going to get into that. That completely backfired, but I don't think he liked the tone of that question either. So, look, I don't know how well training went. We can only take the players at face value, but they didn't look like a team who had put 2 good weeks of training together.
It's still training.
I know,
but
Alan
Iverson.
They were so disjointed. And, you know, go back to your original question, like, is it a blip? Like, my honest answer is I don't know, but they have 3 games, albeit again not against like ultra top tier nations, even though the results at the weekend will show you that this is a really good Argentina team. Australia are improving, and so are Fiji.
It's funny, like, you know, I'm reminded of another window when Ireland came into it in really good form, expected to win a big game at home, and lost badly, and everything fell apart. It was in 2019 against England. I'm getting it, and the reaction to that, I'm getting similar vibes. Not saying it's the same in any way, other in terms of personnel or the form, but just that little bit of the vibes, you know, just going from my gut feeling. So I'm very intrigued to see how they've been.
There's a lot of panic out there. Like, I met David Walsh after the game, and he was like,
he said it was the decline of this team.
I was like, no, it was a bad night. They had a bad night. You know, like, they haven't forgotten how to catch and pass. They look like it on Friday, but I imagine they'll remember for the next game. And I think, you know, they probably needed a bit of a jolt. They might have come in a little bit kind of maybe more relaxed, haven't had such a good... haven't played, you know, I think maybe haven't finished the tour in South Africa so well. Like, let's not forget, they had a really commanding lead in that game against South Africa and nearly threw it away, and they kind of forced themselves to dig themselves out of a hole. So I wouldn't say that was perfect down there. Brilliant result, and unbelievably tough place to go. But, like, you know, let's not forget, and they were really poor in that first test at times as well. Yeah, like, I think, you know, maybe just a bit of a reality check. I think, you know, as well, we probably shouldn't forget, like, Furlong is a big loss. Like, Bealham is good. I think he's a good on the bench, but I don't know if, like, I thought he was poor on the weekend. I thought he had a lot of sloppy stuff. I thought
penalties.
But I thought he got away with it. He got away with loads.
Yeah.
Like, I thought the referee actually could have pinged Ireland quite a bit more during that, you know, that New Zealand period where they were on top. Now, everyone kind of moaned about that scrum penalty, and I will admit that did look like a pen. Now, it was you just have to play to the whistle. I thought, you know, Gibson Park didn't do great there looking for the pen.
And I'm not sure. I'm no scrum expert, but, like, I watched it back.
It looks like he's born in a bit.
A little bit, and actually
they all look.
But when I watched,
not every referee can be wrong. Like, every time Ireland give away a penalty, people are like, "Oh, Porter's such a good scrummager." The referees just don't understand how good a scrummager he is. like
No, but the pain came from the from the play after, Will, from the there was a turnover after. It wasn't from the scrum.
Oh, there was a scrum. I'm talking about the scrum in the second half.
Finlay Bealham on the hour mark.
So he got pinged.
Yeah,
Bealham got pinged.
Yeah,
I thought it was for the play after.
Tom O'Toole went off and Finlay Bealham came back. I know because I'm on my third watch at the moment.
Oh, right, sorry.
And he got pinged for not driving straight. Basically, what Andrew Porter
same kind of thing.
Oh, well, it did look like that actually. So,
but I thought it looked fair, and I think it's worth pointing out. I'm actually doing a piece at the moment around their indiscipline. Like 13 penalties to 5 was pretty damning. But Ben Kay was on commentary on TNT when I was watching it back, and as it happened, he was absolutely adamant that it was a Stonewall penalty.
New Zealand.
To New Zealand.
Yeah.
So sometimes we have to take off the green tinted glasses, because a lot of people were on to me about that. Like, that was a terrible decision. Like, Ireland were going forward. And like, I'm not the biggest Scrum expert at all. But I think when a guy like Ben Kay at the time is going, it was actually Piardi, the touch judge, that called it. And he had a great view of it. So look, I think sometimes, as you said, Will, like, this is an ongoing theme. Their line out issues, once again, 3 lost line outs. I thought the line out at the very
line
end
out was better though at times, and it was tricky. Like, it was messy too, but they had a few good ones. Like, there was a period where the team was going, you're going, oh jeez, don't even want the ball going.
The last line out when Rob Herring was on the pitch was just so jarring. Like, no one got up in the air for Ireland, and I think it was Tui Pilato just got up and stole it. I thought Scott Barrett was brilliant in the second row for New Zealand. They just did a job, and a lot of people complaining that they didn't keep the gap. But you have to adapt on the hoof, and I don't think this Ireland team do it well enough. You know, whether it's like how the referee is officiating the breakdown or how he's officiating the scrum. I think at times Ireland are guilty of almost trying to find out afterwards through the official channels, okay, what could we have done better there? But it's too late to find out what to do better there. They lost the penalty count, like I said, 13-5. Look, you're never going to win a test match with those kind of numbers, especially not against a team like the All Blacks. And look, Nick Berry was the ref then. I actually thought, by and large, he had a fine game. Sure, there were a couple of questionable decisions, but Paul Williams is the referee, a New Zealander, this weekend. And look, the Argentinian players, in theory, would be used to having him in the Rugby Championship or whatever. But Ireland have to adapt on the fly. There's no use in the aftermath going, oh, we should have done this better around the breakdown. We should have rolled away quicker. And like, Ireland push to the absolute limits around the breakdown. It's a key part of how they get such quick ball. Now, I will say New Zealand pushed limits as well, and how Cortes Rattam
that was the one call I was like, that was a miss.
Shocking.
It should have been a yellow card.
Yeah, how they got away with that when Bundy Aki carries off 33 minutes off the line out, and Ireland are deep into 22. But look,
it looks like the ball rolls out.
It looks like, I actually thought Ronan Kelleher's leg had hit it, but then you see it back, and Rattam is like, as blatant as you can. So look, you can go through any game with a fine tooth comb, but 13-5 penalty count says it all, really.
Yeah. To go back to the bench selection, and Andy Farrell getting Tetchy in the press conference, because I must say, like, we did our podcast on Tuesday before the team had been named. When I saw that bench selection, I was like, God, that is not a impactful. It's like, you're looking at the forwards. Rob Herring, who hadn't played this year. Keane Healy, who's kind of become a break glass in case of emergency replacement. Tom O'Toole, who's very inexperienced at that level and ultimately got injured right away. And then you've Henderson, O'Mahony, guys at the back end of their career who've been injured this season and have very little form to speak of. And then like Peter O'Mahony gets 10 minutes. The game was already done when he was sprung. So I'm like, what is he even there for? If not, because in the haka he was so like G'd up. I was like, oh, he's ready for this. And then he doesn't even get called in until the game is 10 points down with 10 minutes to go. I thought that was kind of like, what's the point on having other guys in the squad? And I actually want to read you guys one quote from Andy Farrell that I thought was very interesting. When he was asked about the bench selection after the game, he said, I got a new printer recently.
I was just
showing off my new...
Nice. I was like, what is this?
Pulling out notes. We're getting very serious.
My new printer took me 3 hours to assemble. You can't pull a rabbit out of a hat and throw people in if they're not ready, he said. It's a big test match. We're not South Africa or England or New Zealand in terms of there being thousands of players out there that you can just throw in and see how it goes. That's not the way it is here. I thought that was a baffling comment for Andy Farrell to make. You'd swear he's in charge of a minnow with like no alternatives. Like, what must Izashukwu, Prendergast, Timoney, Baird think? Reading that, like, I not only do I think it's incorrect, it's just like a bad thing for the head coach to say. Like, in answer to what was a very ineffectual bench performance, stock full of guys who are veterans who with no form, and then he's saying, oh, we actually don't have, like, it's not like we could throw in like unbelievable players.
We should point out that quote is from before the game as well. It's at the team.
Oh, sorry, I thought that was after.
No. That was at the team announcement presser, which is a very important fact. That was actually, I think, the answer to the question that I was saying where he got a little tetchy. That was on Wednesday.
Okay.
I'm almost sure. But it's funny you should say that, because again, I wasn't at the press conference, and our good friend Rudd had sent me on the
Yeah, I got that quote from Rudd's piece.
to read it, and I actually texted him when I saw that quote. I was like, how did he say this? Because it doesn't really make sense, because in South Africa he started Jamie Osborne at fullback. He started Craig Casey. Now, granted, there
He's
were
always
injuries.
brought in young
Ryan
players.
Baird, so it didn't make much sense to me to put a message out like that, and like especially when I'd imagine guys like Craig Casey, who I would say was absolutely gutted not to have been on the bench last week. He's Munster's first choice scrum half, but it was a bench that was picked obviously to see out a game, which they obviously had full belief in their game plan that they would be that far in front. They were 13-12 up when Frawley came on.
Like that?
To me, that bench.
I've never thought of. God, I did. I've never thought of a game. But I'd say they'd like, because you just don't know what situation you're going to be like. To be thinking you're going to be ahead. I mean,
well, I don't see how that bench is a bench to come on and change a game we need.
well, O'Mahony. Sorry, okay. To counter that, like obviously the front row, I think he's a little bit more limited than maybe the rest. I think. Yeah, like, is he going to get massive impact in terms of like, is he going to have a Baird or an Izuchuku who's going to be a big carrier? No, he's not going to get that with O'Mahony. But, line-out wise, I think O'Mahony's still probably the best exponent there. You could, steal a lot of ball. You could change the course of the game there. He's good on the deck. So, and he's better than those two there. So maybe he's thinking turnovers, and that's still a great place to attack. And, I'm not 100%. Like, Henderson, in fairness, like, I know he's not as, like, I think you probably have to have someone there who can call a line out coming off. Maybe O'Mahony can do that. But I think, he's still a big carrier of a ball for me. Like, his weakness is definitely everything else, to my mind. Like, I think he's not a good defender.
I thought he was really poor, actually.
Yeah, he gave away a shocking penalty.
He came into the game with very little form and game time and played poorly. As I said, O'Mahony, I've no issue with him being selected. It's the fact that he was selected and then he only played 40 minutes for Munster last weekend, and then a little bit at the start. That he was only trusted to play 10 minutes when the game was already over almost. With your back row replacement, you're usually getting Jack Conan coming on, tearing into guys for 20 minutes at least. Obviously he's injured, but to go with O'Mahony, who he didn't trust to play longer than that, I just felt like it was a very much a wasted, kind of selection.
Like Cian Healy and Conor Murray, I think, got on for 4 minutes. Now I thought Gibson Park was one of Ireland's better players, but
I'm okay with Gibson Park playing.
No, absolutely. But I think rugby now more than ever is a 23-man game, and you're seeing how important the bench is. And Ireland just got absolutely nothing off it, like you said, bringing on guys so late, especially when you have younger guys who, like we've touched on, who played really well in South Africa. Like we said, one of the toughest places to go. And that quote that you read out, Will, I just think it sends out mixed messages. I didn't think that was a very Andy Farrell type thing to say.
As I said, it's at odds with how he selected the team.
Maybe he might regret saying it. I don't know. I'm not going to speak for him.
I know it's to clarify. He said that before. I originally thought it was after the game. He said it before the game, but the point still stands. As in, he said,
and he was Tetchy after in the post match.
I think Ireland do have. Yeah, they definitely do have. Probably 30, 35 top quality internationals to pick from. I think now there's been. I think they've been hit badly enough with injuries in certain areas, but I don't think it's that bad that he should be worried about there being nothing coming through for his bench. I think that's wrong. Yeah. So look, he's not going to get every single answer right. Might have caught him on a bad day, because it's also unusual that he's Tetchy. Usually he doesn't really get like that.
And the quote when he said, another quote that I my printed sheet referring to it again, when he said, it's amazing we're talking about shit like that. As in queries about the one game, is it a slump or is the form? Were you there for that part of it?
I wasn't there for that part of it, but that was after the match, and he took exception to that. And I think Rudd had asked him if he was worried, and he said, "No, are you?" He really threw back to him. So there was definitely a tension.
Rudd and Andy Farrell trading blows.
Rudd always does this. Gets under the skin. But
no, but all jokes aside, it was a fair question. Very rare that I've never seen Andy Farrell, even when they were very poor in year one, never seen Andy Farrell kind of get a little, I'm not going to say rattled, but a little or kind of bite or respond like that. He usually just kind of plays off every question with a straight bat,
and he's usually very positive.
Yeah,
usually he's able to get a fairly positive spin out of nearly everything. And, because I've always been unbelievably impressed with that. You know, the way his kind of attitude to say something messing up the schedule, the bus being late, or all these kind of things are always turned to
adversity.
Be an opportunity. Embrace adversity, whatever it is, whatever he does. So that's why I think that's a bit unusual.
Usually he'd be like, what an opportunity for younger players. Now it's like, we're not South Africa and New Zealand. We don't have thousands of players.
Look, he's allowed to have I think a bad day at the office. I think it's.
I would say he would take that back if he could say, because it's just.
I think so. Yeah, because I think he does have.
I said, that's a quote that I'd expect Joe Schmidt to have said when he was picking the team, because he did pick a team based really on that. He didn't really trust the young players that often. I didn't think. And then obviously Andy Farrell, we mentioned a good few guys there. He's promoted kind of above their time. Almost people were surprised. Mac Hansen, Jamie Osborne,
Frawley,
Gibson Park. Loads of guys. So it kind of is at odds with that. It's just once he went with that bench selection and it did backfire so spectacularly. I suppose the pre-match quote is going to get brought back up. That's why, and the other element of the substitutions obviously was Cian Frawley. We discussed the out half debate last week and who they might select going through November. It was a golden opportunity for Cian Frawley to press his case. 13-12, being trusted to kind of steer the ship home. Unfortunately for him, it was probably his worst 20 minutes since he started playing professional rugby.
It was more like 25 minutes. I think
it was 23. I think.
I think he pulled them up. What I took from that was that he pulled Crowley off fairly early, and he was having a bad day. Kicked okay from the deck, which has been something that we've been a little bit worried about this season. Just with Munster, he's had a few shaky ones, I think, at times that have haven't helped the team. I think, and we talked about him kind of having to get that right this week. I thought he looked okay on that front, but he was really poor. I thought around the pitch, he made a lot of errors too. But then Frawley, that was a real opportunity to say, well, hold on, this actually is a real fight, and didn't capitalise. He had a bad day. Threw some kind of wobbly passes, dropped a few bad ones as well. So a missed opportunity for Frawley, and that's been the story for him so far. In his career, he seems to have got an injury at a bad time or hasn't played well at certain periods. So I think he needs to book that trend himself. Problem for him is that I think he probably won't. I'm not sure he sees. I don't think he's ahead of Crowley now. I think nearly it solidifies Crowley a little bit further. It's a bad day at the office for both of them, and I think when your 10 is having a bad day like that, that really feeds through to the rest of the team, doesn't it? You know what I mean? I think the team weren't playing well, and that makes it harder for the 10. But if the 10 is solid and starts making some good decisions, they didn't actually need to have a great game, I think, to be right in that at the end of the game and make that a sweatier finish for New Zealand. It just was that type of night. And New Zealand, as I said, I don't think are a great team. Very much in flux and looking to find something, looking for leaders within their team, and they're not playing great. I think that was a really disappointing aspect of it, is that the both 10s are up-and-comers, I think. Frawley further on than Crowley, but they just did not play well on a night when they didn't even need to play that great for Ireland to be right there and possibly, sneak away with a win. That's an area where I think those two will have to get right quick, because it's a tough place at 10. It can be very, very lonely out there, I'm sure, with all that pressure on you. And sometimes I think, I heard a lot of chat after the game about Ireland and how they weren't able to adapt the game plan to the conditions. I think a lot of that kind of fed through the 10s. They never really got a chance to bring the team through more than 4 or 5 phases, and they didn't, when they were in positions where they were kind of stagnant or whatever. I didn't think they kicked great. They didn't put the team in really, really great positions to kind of, capitalise on kind of areas in the pitch where they, say they were on the halfway line. They never really were going, well, okay, let's put a really good Gary Owen down into the corner in the 5, let my winger chase it, and let's just put the pressure back on New Zealand and let them kind of clear. That didn't happen that often. They were kind of poor kicks and poor chases and drop balls even when they were throwing it back to kick it. It was just a really messy affair from the two of them. So that's an area where I expect to get improvement straight away from the team, and I think that'll have a really big impact on the team, actually. I think, and I back the two of those guys to get it right.
Just the smaller side, you mentioned that your 10 really got a huge amount of opportunity to go through the phases. I
think they were the problem. Yeah. Sorry, Will. That's
when I was
point.
Watching back the game, and I was like, God, there's so little rugby played in this match. Ireland threw 122 passes. In the World Cup quarter final, they threw 325, so 200 more passes. Because I was kind of thinking, God, was just me, or has there been no rugby when I was watching it back in particular? And I kind of just wanted to measure it against what was a great game, and it shows how little more, how kind of.
How many did New Zealand have? Do you know?
I don't have that in my printed sheet.
Sorry, my
I
bad.
can print off another sheet later, maybe.
Yeah.
Only has a certain amount of ink for the printer.
There's no more space.
I ran out of toner, I think. But yeah, what's your? I don't want to do too much team news predictions because by the time people listen to this, it'll probably be out. But like, what's your reading? Do you expect Crowley to get the nod again?
Sam Prendergast was the biggest winner, and like he has so much room to go before like we're speaking about him as a test quality 10. But there's no doubt that he was the biggest winner of that because as Luke outlined, both Jack Crowley and Kieran Frawley had 2 10s. Had 2 bad nights. Like, I didn't think Jack Crowley had a great game, but I don't know that he stinked the joint out either.
I know he didn't stink it out.
Like I have to say, even live, I was a bit surprised he came off when he did. Ireland were in front. I thought it was a massive decision to give Frawley.
His line kicking was very poor, Cian, though as well.
Yeah.
You mentioned that was poor. Like he really didn't help the team into touch.
Fair, but I still thought it was a big decision to take him off at the time. You don't often see. I know obviously England have been doing it and they did it to their detriment against the All Blacks a couple of weeks ago, but I don't know. I thought it was.
Do you think Farrell thought he had a shocker?
Well, clear. Like
that's what I think.
Like if he took him off, unless it was a predetermined thing that they wanted to see Frawley get 20 or 25 minutes.
You don't do that against New Zealand or South Africa.
Well, like he said after the game, he said. It was like just wanted to change things up and give Frawls a chance.
I asked him, and that's
he's not going to go.
He's not going. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but
we're not South Africa or New Zealand. That's
but yeah, like it was such a big missed opportunity for Kieran Frawley. Not to state the obvious and repeat that what Luke has just outlined, but I would worry that his cameo was so poor that like that will stick in coaches' mind. Like some of the stuff he did was just really shocking stuff for that level.
Well, I thought the same. We got some of the similar stuff from Frawley. Like remember, like Frawley doesn't really get a chance to, like he doesn't come in when the team's really on top. I don't think they were never on top in that game. I think. He's got to come on and make an impact. So he never gets to grow into the game. So Crowley gets to kind of like. I think he gets to play in large parts of the game where, it's not going well, but he has a longer period to kind of relax and get into the game a little bit. Like, whereas Frawley's got to come in and make an impact in tough conditions.
It was a winning position, though.
They were leading, so it's not as if he had the press thing. But he did, kind of from the...
He was firing passes, he was dropping balls. Like, for that try, I thought defensively he was questionable. Look, I would put it down to just a really bad night at the office. And like I said, he wasn't the only one, but my fear would be that when it comes to it again, that'll be in. Now, he does have credit in the bank from what he did in South Africa, absolutely no doubt about it, but it was just so poor that I wonder if it will, play in the coach's mind. Then again, maybe they'll give him a chance this week, and not to go too much on, the possible team, like you said, Will, but maybe they give him a chance. But again, in my mind, I would probably agree with you, Luke, that even as it wasn't a good day for Crowley either, he probably comes out of it with a little bit more credit because Frawley wasn't able to close the gap. So really disappointing from Frawley's point of view, and also from a depth chart point of view, because if Frawley had come on there and played well and Ireland had seen out a narrow victory, wow, like then we're having a real debate right now about the 10 position. And as it is, I think it was probably as it was before the game that Jack Crowley is in the possession of the 10 jersey.
I do think, like, I will say one thing, it's pretty hard to come on. I think it's a hard thing to do that, and I don't think that was all down to him. That there was loads of, like, you think of some of the penalties, like that turned very quickly, and not just on Frawley's efforts. Like there was some awful stuff like given away, like there's some of the penalties given away at ruck time and stuff. Like
so James
they kind of made it worse.
James Lowe neck roll was the one that really started in that period.
Like
and they were like deep in the New Zealand 22 just after scoring.
And they were 13-9 up,
and they were still down to 14 players.
That's a real game. That was a real game changer.
It did change from there, and they just made so many mistakes. So like
even the scrum one. The scrum one is not his. That's not his.
No, and I'm not putting it all on Frawley at all, because like I said, I thought Ian Henderson was really poor off the bench for an experienced guy who you want to come on, bring in cool, calm heads. Now he one ball that he knocked on, I didn't think it was the greatest pass from Frawley, but
another sloppy one backwards.
And he gave away a really stupid penalty in front of the post that Mackenzie kicked as well. So look, you could go through the whole 23 except for the guys who barely got a looking at the end. It just wasn't a good night at the office, and I think the onus now, I think we're probably in agreement that it was a blip, hopefully, but there's pressure on now the players to prove that it was just a blip, and not just by scraping a win against a really good Argentina team. And I can't emphasise that enough. When I said earlier, top tier teams, they are massively improved and had a really positive rugby championship. But Ireland need a big performance here. I think they need a statement performance to prove.
Stating the obvious, but the November schedule has gotten a lot more tougher after the weekend. We saw Australia go to Twickenham and win and play some really good rugby. They have their new star, Joseph Suaalii. Fiji winning in Wales as well. That's the third game when ordinarily you'd be like, oh, let's make wholesale changes. If you do that, there's a possibility of Fiji maybe going and winning in the Aviva, which obviously will be not a good result to state the obvious. So I think Friday night, I was already going to look forward to it because obviously Argentina, beating South Africa, Australia and New Zealand in the rugby championship. But now it's Ireland kind of a bit desperate now. And I will wonder how does that kind of produce a really strong, emphatic rebuttal to last Friday? Or is there nerves about having to get it right? And with Andy Farrell leaving at the end of this window for a year, how does that manifest itself?
Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? If they win the last 3 games, you're kind of going, okay, ship is steadied, everything will be okay. But if they don't, you're kind of going, geez, this is not a great time for the best coach in the world to be leaving your setup. You know what I mean? So, yeah, look, my expectation is that they get this right. I don't think the Argentinians always travel great. Besides, obviously, they had a great victory in New Zealand this year, which is obviously an unbelievably tough place to go and get a win. I think it was their first ever in New Zealand as well. So, but generally, they're not unbelievable. Traveling, they do great at World Cups, but just traveling in these tours, and I think I'm expecting a reaction out of the Ireland team. I think, straight away they can pull in that penalty count. I think they're very capable of doing that. So I don't think you get the same opportunities or easy opportunities into the game against them. I think their defence gets better. I thought they were, they looked like a team that weren't that organised there. They had a lot of bad mistakes. So there's 2 areas straight away where I think it should be different. I think the line out again was probably highlighted. I think they'll get a little bit better there. Maybe, I hope. I saw some signs of them getting ball in better places in the line-out through the game. I know they were sloppy, but I was a little bit more pleased with the line-out than I have been because it's been an absolute dire area for them. I think the scrum will be worse though. The RGs are good there. They're very strong and probably better than New Zealand. So that's maybe an area I'd be a little bit concerned about. But I expect Ireland to be able to catch the ball this weekend. I think
fix that alone. It's like the amount of areas.
And I think the ruck will come into focus. Like all these big areas that are kind of crucial to the game and really allow you to build your confidence, get a bit of momentum, get on the right side of the referee. Because if you have the ball, you're going forward. The referee, I think the referee is a different picture of you then, because it feels like you're going forward. It feels like you're in control of the game. You'll generally have more territory if you're doing that too. So I think I expect them to get all these things a little bit better than they did in the weekend. And I think they come out with a good. I think they'll win this one, and I think they'll win it well on the weekend. Actually,
I think the discipline is worth going back to, because obviously we've touched on the fact that they conceded 13 penalties to New Zealand's 5, and I was having a look back, to see. I just went to the games this year, the 8 games that they've played. If 13 was a bit out of character, it's actually the third time that they've conceded 13 penalties in one game. They've conceded 11 in 2 more games. So if you take it that the magic number is 10, that you don't want to go over 10, then there is a bit of a trend there in terms of Ireland. The only game where it was way under was Scotland in the Six Nations. They only conceded 4. The other games were 8 and 9. So they've been really hovering around that 10 mark. And look, I think this is an Irish team who do generally pride themselves on their discipline, but you just can't be giving up 13 penalties to really good quality teams like you did, especially when they're only conceding 5. And like I said, it's Paul Williams, a New Zealander, who's the ref this week. He's going to have a Southern Hemisphere view of things, because there is slight differences between the Northern and the Southern Hemisphere referees, whether it's around the breakdown, like I said, or scrums and things like that. So there's pressure on Ireland to do their homework in terms of what Williams is going to be looking for. And regardless of what that is on the day, like I said, they have to adapt to the referee's interpretation. That is a big thing for this Ireland team, but I don't think they always do well.
One last thing I want to ask you both about, and it's kind of a bit off topic but related to the game, was the criticism the players got for over celebrating moments, or showboating.
From Tony Ward,
Shane Horgan, and a few other people.
Did Shane Horgan say it as well?
He was on Virgin. I didn't watch it, but I saw the quotes. He was the first one I heard kind of sticking it in to Shane or to James Lowe for geeing up the crowd after that 50-22. Is that fair criticism? Do you agree with it? Do you think they were kind of a bit overdoing it?
Did you ever do it? Did you ever? Well, you didn't have a 50-22 on it because it wasn't a thing, but correct. Did you ever? as a left winger?
I don't think so. Joe Schmidt was really harsh on that. Like, I had a pal who nearly caught like a really top quality player, a fellow called Niall Morris, who played over in Leicester, like really top quality player. But he was a young lad near Joe Schmidt, and he went in for a try. It was like a league game, and beautiful dive, but he's given the one finger up on the way over. And he's one of my close mates now, and Joe rinsed him for it. So I remember going, oh, better be careful about any celebrations. I had one stinker throughout my career that I got slagged mercilessly about, and I kind of didn't do it again. I remember Raj rinsed me when I came into Irish camp just after it, so I didn't do it again. But look, James, though, he's kind of an emotional player anyway. I don't think it's unbelievably out of character from him. I do think sometimes that he gets a little bit caught up with that stuff. One thing I would say to him is that I think he celebrates too early for tries sometimes, doesn't finish off the play well. Do you know what, even when it's not him, he often will turn his back, or he'll start celebrating before the thing is done. I have a thing about, I'd love to Barry Sanders it. There's nothing better than the expectation, looking like you expect to be doing what you're doing and not celebrating. There's a little bit of that for me. I'm not sure I'm going to be changing that with James Lowe, and I do think I like that he plays with emotion, plays on the edge. I think it was probably a good time to do it. The crowd did get their backs up there. If Ireland had kind of delivered on that 50-22, I think he could have been off the energy that he generated there. So I didn't have a massive problem with it. I think he maybe overdid it slightly, but for the most part, no, I thought it was good. It was almost like, Gaelic football and hurling, like in the Irish, I know he's New Zealander, but like in the Irish mentality,
when they win a free and they give it,
but it gets the credit. Sometimes there's something in that, Ireland needed something to pick them up. I didn't necessarily have a massive problem with that.
I saw some people saying, when English players do it, it's so cringy, and people slag them, and now Irish players are doing it. But there's a massive difference for me for if it's a crooked line out and Ben Earl is on one knee, pumping two fists, versus James Lowe, as you say, hitting a phenomenal 50-22, first of all. But that gave Ireland a lifeline when the game was almost.
But Ireland were playing terrible.
Yeah, so they needed a lift. The crowd was flat, and when I actually watched it back, he doesn't actually over celebrate as much as I had thought. When I saw, he looks at the crowd for about 2 or 3 seconds and is kind of nodding his head. And that's it. I thought it was going to be a lot worse.
I agree, actually.
There's a couple of things on this for me, and I pretty much agree with everything you said. You want players to show their personality, and I think you were kind of touching on that as well. And Lowe is one of, a guy who likes to express himself, and he's been so brilliant and infectious for Leinster and Irish rugby since he's come over. You don't want that going out of the game either. And also, the 50-22, if we can just take that in isolation, was unbelievable.
It was a serious bit of skill. Yeah.
That is probably the best 50-22 I've seen in terms of skill execution.
He was so tight to the touchline.
And it's just that banana.
It was a bit of a banana. Yeah,
it was banana. It was absolutely beautiful, and he clearly meant it.
I think it was a fluke.
But also, there was 10 or 11 minutes left, I think, at the
there was 7.
But it was a crucial. No,
there was plenty of time left. So, if that had led to a try, then obviously no one is even discussing this. So it is obviously a fine line to tread. But obviously, I had read Tony Ward's column, and that was really strong. And
Tony's from the generation
I know,
before,
of course,
so it's kind of completely different.
Absolutely.
But Shane Horgan was saying it as well, though.
Yeah, look, I think probably I'd say, when you look at the maths of it, it wasn't like it was okay, there's 5 points in it. Do you know that kind of way? And you're kind of going, well, this is a good time. So I can see Shaggy's thinking on it too, but I felt like Ireland needed a lift. I didn't have a massive problem. When you're in the stadium, the crowd, there was a real buzz off the back of it. Kind of
one of the few of the night, because
and they needed something to cheer for. So I didn't have a massive problem. As I do say, that's the kind of player James Lowe is. I do think sometimes he does it too early. I think there's times where he celebrates, but when you're going
diving into the corner, tricking him.
There's a few things like that. You're kind of going, here, just focus, just get the thing done, then do the celebrating. I don't have this massive problem with that. Because I think Cian's got a point. You do want to see a little bit of personality there. It is good to see that. The interaction with the crowd, I don't think it's what it was. And rugby is under a little bit of pressure. You need to have a little bit of buzz. And kids love all that stuff too. I know I'm going very broad here, but I just think he should manage it maybe a little bit better. But in that circumstance, not a massive problem.
There was a good few instances of when penalties were won and players turning to the crowd and really giving it a fist pump as well. It wasn't just the James Lowe.
I think Porter does it a good bit too.
Andrew Porter did it early on. And he obviously blocked down the box kick and then forced the knock on. I don't really have an issue with that as well, especially at the Aviva. You were there as well, Will? Yeah. The atmosphere was rubbish. You know what I mean? Now I know that
they had nothing to cheer for.
It was
probably
the worst game I've ever
turgid.
But the atmosphere at the Aviva is an ongoing thing where it's just
But there's been a few days against the All Blacks where it was unbelievable. 13 was unbelievable, I remember. Yeah.
The All Blacks is the one you can usually guarantee it will be lifted.
And I think the crowd wanted to be in. That's when it was going, there was a really good buzz going.
And the haka and the way Ireland, like Peter O'Mahony, launched them up, like that was great. And look, obviously, the crowd needs something to get into it too. But that's just to go back to your point or your question, Will. That's why I don't have a huge problem like with Porter in the first minute giving it that, because the crowd then are into it. James Lowe for the 50-22 at a crucial game a crucial moment where if Ireland score, then they're back like really within a score. So
Storm in a teacup.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah,
they have to bin the presidential pre-match thing. It takes so long, and it really does drain the atmosphere. It's nothing against Michael D. Higgins. You know, I just don't think it's something that's necessary.
I like a bit of tradition.
For every home match, like, if it was a final, I'd be like, fair enough, let him at it. Like,
I don't mind it.
Before the Fiji game, like, do we really need a president coming out to say hello to everybody? Like,
it's a big moment. You're representing Ireland, you know. I think it's the politicians want their little bit of limelight too, but I also think, you know, it's a welcome to the country, and I think it's part of it. I think I don't want to see that gone just because there's a little bit of a lull. Sure, it's a chance to get a drink as well for some people who are doing that, and actually
not enough for that. I was going to say
there's a problem, but there is a problem with that during the game. So I don't really have a problem if that 10 minutes before the anthems, if people I see it as a nice opportunity for that too. Okay. You know, so.
But they tried to do like this light show, which to be fair they did at the Leinster Lions game and they did at the Munster All Blacks game a couple of weeks ago, and it does look really cool when it's done properly, but they did it too early at the weekend. Most of the seats were empty and the lights were just going at like a different time, and it just did not work at all. And like, I admire the RFU for trying to come up with different things, but I mean, it just didn't work at all, so they need to have a look at that.
For a second I thought you were calling Leinster the Leinster Lions, and I was like, that's really crazy.
But they did it at the Leinster Lions game, and to be fair, it was the Thoma Park game a couple of weeks ago, which I was down at, and I'm only using these two examples because they were games. It was a full Thoma Park, and it actually looked really cool. They dimmed the lights and everyone's phones were on, and I think it works off an app, and it did look really cool. So that's what they were going for, but it didn't work because they did it too far away from kickoff, and people were still in the pubs or else in the concourse getting
like a pre-match light show followed by a presidential greeting that takes 15 minutes, followed by your 2 anthems, followed by a haka.
3 anthems.
But it all builds the anticipation.
3 anthems.
It all builds the anticipation, I think.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think
it's for you.
A little overkill for me. 2 rule changes I want to discuss with you guys as well. Firstly, the kicking one. You know, Ireland got 3 points in front of the post, and their try came from it as well, so it benefited Ireland the weekend. But what did you make of it? Because it was whistled. I think it was mostly in the Ireland game. I watched the rest of the matches too. But what do you make?
I was a one in the England game too. Yeah.
I
think it's a stinking rule. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I think it's terrible.
I don't
understand why. Like, so they're obviously trying to discourage box kicking, it looks like, or I don't know what it seems like they're trying to encourage it, actually.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
because you now have a competition, whereas I was thinking if you're trying to, like, that's a part of the game that's really slow, alongside resetting of scrums, which is just a proper problem in the game. This setting, like, I think it encourages it, and I think it's something that we're trying to go away from, to be honest with you. So I think it's a terrible rule. I think also, how do you stop someone heading back into that lane if the kick is short or when it's high winds? Say when it's a high wind and the ball starts blowing backwards, like, because you need to be in the channel for the ball. Like, I think it's very difficult to referee it. I think the thinking behind it is hard to manage as well. I just think I don't like it. Don't like it at all. Actually, I think it's a terrible rule. Like, there's lots of
those penalties look so cheap. Watching
cheap.
Like they didn't look
it's silly.
Like, there already is a rule in place if there's someone deliberately kind of moving across a runner, and I think that worked pretty well. I don't remember really that many times being like, oh, that was blatant blocking.
What happened when the kick's short? What happens when the kick's short? Like, you have to. So, like, if you're running back there, you take your line off the guy coming in off the, because you can't see it generally. Do you know what I mean? So you take your line off the guy anyway who's coming in to gather the ball. So if it's short and you have to look up at the end and catch it, how many times do you see a guy doing that? Also, teams have plays where they dummy the box kick and do the shorter one, into the space so that it lands to try and get a weird bounce or try and get someone to, in the space. It was used against Leinster quite a bit last year. So yeah, I don't know. I don't get the rule. I think it's a bit silly. I don't see why we'd be encouraging the counter argument is that we're encouraging competition, but I don't know if we want to encourage competition in this area. Personally,
do people love to see high ball
High balls into a scrum. I don't want to see that.
I do love a good aerial contest, and it was a brilliant one in the second half. I think it was Hugo Keenan. But my big concern would be that it actually encourages more kicking. Now, I suppose World Rugby are probably thinking that if there is a more fair contest look and teams are able to bat the ball down, then it encourages more counter-attacking play and broken field play.
I would have thought if you're protecting the catcher, it encourages more.
Yeah,
If you think about it,
I'm just playing devil's advocate.
but if you take the two, so there's two parts of the game I see as massively, like, way too slow. The scrum resets are a disaster. If you look at the clock the next time there's a few scrum resets.
Start of the match.
It's an absolute disaster, right? So if you think about this, what is this thing encouraging? It's encouraging a competition where it's, if you do, oftentimes there's a knock on from it, which leads to a scrum. It also encourages people to set up to compete in the position, which causes this silly thing where there's people, lengthening out the back of the ruck, which takes the 5 seconds. So that's a slow part of the game too. I think it's encouraging. What it's going to lead to is two parts of the game which actually slow up the whole contest. I don't love it. I actually like if you kick it and you get good, because it's hard to get back into the area and do it properly without changing channels. If people are changing their channel and blocking the runner, that's fine with me. But if you can protect your catcher, it leads to cleaner ball. It leads to an opportunity where the guy who catches it might be able to attack the line if they don't get the kick chase right. It also leads to a position where if they don't get the numbers right and you do, you can attack more clearly on the way back. I think it doesn't clean up the game. I think it slows it down.
There's one thing I saw on Friday night, I'm not sure if it was influenced by this new rule change, but I thought it was kind of bizarre. In the first half, Ireland got a scrum free kick between the halfway or the 10 and the 22, and usually that'd be like quick tap by Doris and off they play. There was like a conversation and it was slow, and then Crowley did an up and under into the 22 that New Zealand fielded, and I was thinking, were they hoping they could get a clean contest off that? Because you want your number 8 rampaging towards the 22 there, and I'd love to know if that was at their forefront, because if it was, I'm alarmed, because that's
I don't like the rule.
What you want from that free kick rule off a scrum is quick ball with the number 8 usually.
Did you see the week before in the England All Blacks game, very similar scenario, and Marcus Smith put up a Gary Owen that basically landed on the try line.
It was terrible.
And you're kind of going, surely you have an attacking move here that you can play. And Ireland have been so good at this, whether it's the goal line dropout or anything like that, coming up with
generally
innovation.
the pack has to get back into position.
Absolutely. So I actually don't think it suits Ireland. I think a few years ago when Conor Murray was Ireland's scrum best box kicker. No, but I mean that genuinely.
I agree with you.
Best box kicker probably there ever has been. Like on the money the whole time. But I just don't think that that's a strength of Jamison Gibson Park's game. It's probably not a strength of James Lowe and Mac Hansen as wingers to be getting up for high balls. So I agree with you. Jack Crowley did it, and I was kind of going, please tell me this isn't now the way the game is going, that we're not going to have more little innovations and stuff. So, and I'd say also if you were playing in the back three, if you were a full back, the amount of times you're getting absolutely nailed now because you've got no protection. And like you said, Will, there was laws there to protect it anyway. And look, sometimes you could see blatant ones where 2 and 3 players are almost forming a wall to protecting, stuff like that. I'm okay with that being penalised, but like you said, Luke, there are going to be times where you're running back and it's just very difficult. Like Geordie Barrett got out of the way at one point and actually had to do this big animation move to show, and it just looked ridiculous, because he obviously didn't want to concede a penalty. Jamison Gibson Park gave away one on Mark Talea in the first half as well. So I don't know if Ireland were too happy. Andy Farrell was asked about it, and it seemed like they didn't have enough time to prepare and stuff. Now they did only concede one penalty off,
and they got 10 points out of it. They got, God knows
what the
scoreline would have been if the law hadn't been in place.
But it's a law, it's a trial, isn't it? I don't know if it's been fully.
But it'll be voted in, I'd say. These seem a fair complete. Brings me on to my next one, was a 20-minute red card that we've discussed a good bit, but it really reared its head in the Wales-Fiji game. Radradra thunders in like a missile, almost decapitates Cam Winnett, and then he's replaced by, they have an unbelievable back three guy on the bench who comes on, and Fiji end up deservedly on the balance of play. But if Radrandra's not replaced, I do not think Fiji win that game. Gallen after the game said he's in favour of it because he doesn't, which I fair play to him. He came out and said that after.
All New Zealanders are in favour from my experience down there.
It's just for me very jarring because I do there still is a red card for whatever gross acts of thuggery or foul play. To me, that Radradra one has to fit the bill. If that Radradra one isn't a straight red, then the whole thing is completely pointless. If that's being mitigated down to yellow for 20 minutes, I think we've just lost the plot. Then I can see merit in there potentially being a 20-minute red card only to fit like a fairly narrow degree.
Do we need to make rugby more complex or clearer? Like
for people trying to come into the game.
I'm just saying if they're insisting on going down this route, I think the middle yellow card 20-minute thing should be the one that's used the least amount almost, if you get me. Like that should only fit a very narrow definition, in my opinion, of foul play where it's clearly accidental. Like whereas the Radradra one to me is so reckless that it has to be a straight red card. So I'm very worried. Not worried. I'm like that. It doesn't work for me if that's the kind of play that it's going to be excused with the substitute. And I agree with you. It's being pushed by the Southern Hemisphere. It seems like the new chairman is going to be this Australian Brett Robinson. And like, I think the French are the only people who've publicly said they're against it.
Ireland.
No, but they're in favour of this trial. And they came out and said, which is the red card. Because originally there was going to be no additional red card. It was just going to be like a red card for 20 minutes with no actual extra punishment. So like it looks like this is going to be coming in potentially. We have another 3 weeks, and if there's a few more games like that, potentially not. But look, I know you guys have both been very vocal against it on this show.
No one's listening to us though in World Rugby. No one's listening to us. But I hate it. I tweeted about it at the weekend, and I immediately have to mute the thread because I forgot that like just so many people seem to be in favour of it. Like, I just don't buy into this notion that like a red card ruins a game. Like that incident at the weekend like was worthy of a red card. For shots like that, there has to be punishment. And look, Radradra probably get a few week ban or whatever, but like they should have been down to 14 for the rest of the game. Like you said, they're able to replace him with another quality player off the bench. I just don't think at a time when rugby is in such a, like, I don't think it's over-egging it by saying a perilous position with cases that are going on, legal action that's being taken. Like, again, like not to get like too philosophical, but like parents, you know, want their kids playing, and then they see this guy at the very top level that's being watched by millions of people around the world. One of the biggest stars of the game as well, Semi Radradra, gets a 20-minute red card for this. I just don't know what message it sends out at all, and I'm. Like, it really leaves me deeply uncomfortable when you read the testimonies of a lot of these players. And like, I know World Rugby have done so much to clean up the game, but while all of this is still ongoing to mitigate down,
but it undercuts that work. It undermines it completely. Like, yeah, I don't get like you're right. Like it's when the mammies start going, no, you're not. You're not playing rugby,
and that's legitimately going to happen.
That will happen because what's going to come up, it's going to be in lights now, like, and it's going to be more in focus because like we haven't even got to the point where they're talking about settlements yet. You know what I mean? They're still adding people to the case. It sounds like to me. So, I think it's an amazing, amazing faux pas, I think, to be making at a really critical juncture. I think you need to be seen to be really strong on this. And I think if people are, like, as you said, like that was a cut and dry red card off the pitch, unacceptable. Like, it's just not acceptable. And like, it's not to have a go at them. Like, it's the problem is you're always, because you're fighting with, you know, that, like, it's so emotional out there. It's like you have to be totally, it's 100% commitment physically. And anyone who doesn't do that gets shown up and lets the team down. That's the mindset going out there. But there has to be something in the back of your mind going, technique, while I have this mindset. And if you're able to get away with it in any way or it's mitigated down, I think it just undermines really a lot of the hard work that's been going on the last couple of years in the game. Even if there's times, like you look at the World Cup final where you're going, God, how disappointing was that? But I thought that, you know, in the same breath, they missed an opportunity to go at Sia Khaleesi. You know, he should have been sent off in my mind in the World Cup final as well. So, yeah, it's undoing a lot of the hard work I think that they've done, and I think it's at a really critical juncture. So I'm really worried about this actually.
And you and I agree with those points. And you talked about the confusion. Like at one stage, if you were watching Wales Fiji on TV, you had like a yellow card graphic, a yellow/red card graphic, then a red card graphic, and another yellow card graphic. There's a bunker review going on. Like it's extremely complex.
Rugby's so technical. Like it's difficult to follow. Like I like. Sometimes I'm at places in the Aviva where you're with people who are not rugby people, who are kind of playing, you know, football, hurling, or soccer, or whatever their sport is, and they've kind of been invited to this, whatever, you know, but whatever it is, and you're kind of they'll be asking you about the game. You're going, like, yeah, this is tricky. Like I said, I actually don't know. I had a rugby ball in my cot, and my dad played. So like I've been listening to someone who knows rugby for like since I can listen to rugby, I'm listening to someone who knows about rugby, and played it for my job, and I still can't decipher, you know, certain instances and go, geez, I can see two sides to this. adding another layer of complexity to it, I think is anything we're doing that's doing that at the moment is not helping the game.
I think it actually says a lot that the French are coming out so strongly against it, considering that their disciplinary is pretty spotty. Like, of all the teams that might want to be backing it to help themselves, they're actually saying, no, we think this is ridiculous. Like, France are often on the wrong side in some big games of disciplinary problems like that.
Totally, yeah. Like, rugby doesn't help itself with all of the law tweaks. And look, some of them have been brilliant, like the 50-22 and stuff. But if you are trying to attract new people to the game, there's so many tweaks. Like, we've just talked about the escorting one at the moment, that it's very hard for new fans to stay engaged when we're the ones, trying to stay on top of it as well. And like, I think, look, I like the idea of the bunker, like potential yellow cards being upgraded to red. But,
Agreed, actually. Really good.
But one thing that really annoys me about it, and I don't know if there's a way around it other than refs just being stronger, but I don't think they ever will be because the bunker is there, is that for incidents like Radradra, I think optically, and I'm talking about now for your casual viewer, I think it looks really bad when like they're getting a yellow card, and rather than just like showing a red card, like, I mean, like the red card in all sports is like fairly, you know what it means, you're off. But I don't think we'll ever see like a straight red card like that, because the refs are just going to defer decision.
Speed it up.
You know what I mean?
To be fair, it's to speed the game
no,
up.
It is, but if an incident is really bad, like if it's a high shot, if it's a dirty shot, whatever it is, I just think like optically, again, for the safety, for the sake of the future of the game and trying to get young kids to play it, I would like to see refs, having the courage to brandish a red card, but I just don't think it will happen because the bunker is there, and I do get why it is there, and I think it is really helpful. But I think, like I said, in terms of attracting new people, I just don't think showing a yellow card sits well with me at all for certain incidents. I'm not saying all incidents at all.
I'll be interested to see how it develops over the next couple of weeks before they do vote on these trials. So that was in the Fiji-Wales game, a 10th Test match defeat in a row for Wales. They have Australia coming this Sunday, who are in kind of rejuvenated form after that great win at Twickenham, 40-37 or 42-37, I think it was.
Yeah.
An absolutely belting game of rugby. Great to see Australia playing well. Obviously, Lions Tour to come, World Cup to come there as well. Joe Schmidt had gotten off to a sticky start, but great to see them get back in the right track, and obviously beating England as well is no harm.
Always pleasant viewing. I think, look, they still conceded probably too many points, but I think they can be really pleased. I think that's quite a good England team. I know their defence was atrocious on the weekend at times, but there was still some good play that picked them apart. Like the last try was a bit of magic. Like I know Marcus Smith, like it's shocking defence out wide, but you can see why. Like once the ball's tucked into the arm and he does the no look. Like there's plenty of good players have been caught out by that one. Now I would add, his tackle assist was the wimpiest looking tackle assist ever. He nearly closes his eyes and goes backwards. So if you're going to get in, you got to get in and try and block the space. But it was a beautiful bit of play, and like even the pass from I can't remember the flanker's name, but he gives a lovely little tip pass out the back, like a lovely. It was a real Joe Schmidt type play, just beautiful handling from everyone. You can see like there's a lot of training drills that you kind of do that, and fitness drills that you do where you're kind of playing open field, and he kind of really encourages that type of stuff. I thought Leinster at their best when he was our coach. There was loads of tries like that with like lovely little bit of kind of touches and passing before contact. So I thought that was brilliant to see, and yeah, great to see them a little bit rejuvenated. It'll give them belief. I think he's probably the perfect guy for the job. You've heard me say that a few times, Will, because I think he'll be able to get them. Like he's really good after a win like that, saying, "Okay, well, let's take a breath. Enjoy, but let's take a breath on Monday." I can see him kind of rinsing them for a few things, which I think will be good for them, and hopefully they continue on growing, because I think we need Australia to be strong. Like rugby's not the same without Australia being strong. I have to say, like they're a big miss from the international
scene, especially for the next few years with the Lions in the World Cup.
Well, just the World Cup too, and I just think, just generally speaking, like Australia have always been operating, with more numbers than Ireland, for example, but not that many more. Like they're really competing like us on a few fronts with, for eyeballs and for people kind of playing the game with Aussie rules and league and all that kind of stuff over there. So they're under pressure there, have been for a while. Their teams are, financially under pressure. So that's a huge job that he's kind of undertaken. I think, if the Australian national team are doing well, that's when you get a few young bodies back in, interested in watching the team. You got a few superstars emerging, which we thought was really, really, great
and
to
some
see.
league fans to pay attention as well. Like,
I think so.
Superstars
He was so good.
He had a few really nice.
The ball behind, magic stuff.
And his first game of rugby since he was in school, rugby union, that is, which I thought was impressive. You want to get your opinion on England? It's funny, like, so they won the game. They blew the game. They won the game again, and they blew the game again. I actually agree with Luke. Even though the last 2 weekends have been disastrous in terms
of good,
I do think they look better. Like, it's funny that like the RFU have had to come out and give Borthwick a vote of confidence, and I can understand because the fans are unhappy because they've blown a lot of games this year, other than the Ireland one. But I do think there's something in the team, there's a nucleus of that team that does look very exciting to me.
Yeah, but I think Felix Jones leaving is a massive...
Very stark now, isn't it?
It's massive for them. I know he wasn't necessarily brought in to do the defence, and they felt like Sinfield needed help, and I know they brought in Joel Abd, isn't it? So... they're kind of undone a lot of the good work, because I did feel like coming out of the Six Nations, I was like, yeah, England are definitely coming back here, and I thought Borthwick had released the shackles a little bit, because I thought they were going to play a real kind of Eddie Jones kind of cut and paste job, because he was basically his mentor, and he's gone with Marcus Smith at 10, but he still has a tendency to go back to George Ford, and I know he took Marcus Smith off, but then
that's what to me that's killed in the last 2 weeks. If he'd actually trusted Marcus Smith, I think they probably would have won both of them.
Yeah, and he's been, by and large, he's been playing really well, but I think the Felix Jones leaving, because that, like, England, even though they lost in New Zealand in the summer, their defence looked really good as well, and obviously we've seen with Leinster, and obviously Felix Jones has learned everything he's learned pretty much around the defence from Jacques Nienaber, and we've seen how long it's taken Leinster are probably still getting up to speed, if we're being honest, but they're kind of resetting now. I'm sure they're trying to take a lot of the ideas that Felix had implemented there, but it's not the same when he's sitting back in Dublin or wherever he is and not exactly coaching. Such a bizarre scenario that they're finding themselves in now, but that would make me sort of be cautious now about their direction of travel. I think him leaving is a massive kick in the teeth for them.
Yeah, be interested to see how they bounce back over South Africa this Saturday, which is not going to be easy. South Africa played Scotland at the weekend. Ultimately, their bench power did show, but there was a period in that second half where Scotland were really knocking on the door, butchered a few chances. I'm thinking after the game, major missed opportunity. They're kicking themselves. Not so, according to Gregor Townsend. I'll give her to consult my sheet again. I thought it was one of our best performances of the last few seasons, said Townsend. When the game was opening up, we looked at times the fitter team and it looked like we were sharper. So there's a huge amount of pride. Like, he reminds me of, say, a parent, and is just giving their children unconditional love no matter how badly they F up. Like, to me, Scotland butchered some really gilt-edged chances. Hugh Jones twice could have put Van der Merwe away and threw it into touch. I'd like to see Townsend come out and say major missed opportunity. Yes, some of that what he said is true. They did look really sharp, but they also let that game away. And he is the guy feeding the monster that is Scotland's kind of ability to talk themselves up. It's actually coming from the top down, and he might be saying something differently privately, but I suspect he's not. And that kind of comment, I'm just like, oh my God, as in they blew that game in, South Africa with a better team over the course of the 80. Yeah. Probably would have won anyway. But Scotland, when the game was in the melting pot, had a huge number of good chances to get that key try to get them level, missed it, and he's coming out saying the best performance we've had.
I think they, do you know what? My concern with them is that, I think there's times when they're in good positions and they just can't seem to capitalize. The only time they ever seem to be really dangerous is when they're coming from behind, when it seems to be you think about the kind of Twickenham wins the last couple of years where they're coming from behind, you're kind of going, they seem to be able to do that, but they can't seem to kind of kill off a team or be on top for more of the game than not, and I just don't think there's a recipe there for success. And I think I think you're right. I think you're right to pick up on that. I think there's times when you need to stick the boot in and say no, we are better than that. Now look, in the same breath, it is their first. It's the first run out really as well for the most part. It's still early parts of the season. You will get periods where you won't capitalise on opportunities. That does happen from time to time. And the mistakes from Jones, I do like Jones. I think generally speaking he's pretty good.
A great player. I think
he is. And they're kind of uncharacteristic, for the most part. But Scotland are consistently inconsistent, and they have had times they flatter to deceive a lot. And I'd love to see them. Would I love to see them? I probably would love to see them take the next step. Just be a little bit more consistent. Not at Ireland's expense ever, but I think they're a team that has the potential to be better than what they're showing. And we talk about Ireland kind of letting down at the big stage, say at the World Cup, but I thought there was parts of that game where Ireland were quite good. Like Scotland in the big, when it's really counted, have really run out the gate in a lot of big games. When you're kind of
the Ireland-Scotland pool game was over
that was an absolute
time.
stinker. Yeah. So they disappoint me a lot, and I think they're better than they're showing. And I don't think he's fooling anyone with that kind of chat. I think anyone who's really looking at them is thinking they're not delivering on the potential.
I'd be right if I was a Scotland supporter and I heard that after the game, I would be like,
what the hell is he smoking?
I'd be baffled. I'd be like, that was a great chance to get a historic win against the double world champions.
Is he protecting his job when he does it? Do you think there's something in that?
Maybe. He's like, we were so fit and sharp. Who's the coach? Oh yeah, it's me. Like that kind of thing.
Is there something like that?
I don't know. He comes out with these kind of quotes.
He does that a lot. Yeah.
David Nucifora is going in there now, so I'm sure he'll whip them into shape. But I'm actually really enjoying South Africa's sort of, not transition, because they're still obviously sticking to what they're very good at, but the little nuances that they're adding to the game with Tony Brown, we saw bits of it in the summer, but that kick from Willie Leroux was just that is
that just Leroux though? I think he's class.
He was unbelievable against Leinster for the Bulls in the semi-final. He picked them apart. And when he went off injured, and I think the start of the second test, did he in the first minute or early?
But it's such a sneaky little one as well. Do you know, because it doing that skill,
it was the ultimate dink.
That's what I mean. But doing that dink, Marcus Smith had a lovely one the weekend. Australia probably should have got a foot in there somewhere to block it, but it's a lovely bit of skill. But it's easier to hit it into the ground. You don't have to be as deft with it. Like that little chip, on an international stage, to be that calm and collected, because usually a CrossFit kick there, at least you can give it a little bit of a boost. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to be as deft with it. That is a beautiful bit of skill, I think. And he does it very good. Against Leinster, some of those passes, he just has it inch perfect, and they require such skill and I think confidence in yourself and calmness. Unbelievable, He's
35, but he's still so good. He looks very good.
But he always looks like he has time on the ball, which is obviously a sign of a good player. But just the way that Rassie Erasmus used his team. Now, I'd imagine all the big hitters will be back this weekend, but you look at the quality of the bench, but the guys that started, like Andre Estes and he's been so unlucky that he's behind the quality of players like Damien Dialende, Jesse Creel and that, but he was brilliant. They brought in Elric Lowe. Look, they've got huge depth to choose from, but I think from a South African perspective, I'd be really encouraged by how, Rassie has gotten in Jerry Flannery, Tony Brown, new ideas to add on top of what is their
I'd say quite different ideas.
That's what I mean. And
when you say new, I think it doesn't. I don't think it emphasises how big a change it is.
And he's not afraid to do that. You know what I mean? I think he deserves unbelievable credit for that, because look, they're always going to be brilliant at the pack stuff and the scrum. And we saw the bomb squad again.
Pace men outside. They always
absolutely
have that,
but they are freshening up their team for another World Cup cycle, and most of those guys will the big hitters will still be around for the next World Cup. So look, they went back to the number one in the world rankings, I think, this weekend. But not to read too much in world rankings, but
who knows?
The world rankings.
No, I know. But my point is that look, that is where they belong. Do you know what I mean? They are. I think they're comfortably.
Definitely. I think they're getting better as well.
Same here.
I think they've won 2 World Cups, and they're when New Zealand won back to back, there was a sense by the time the Lions tour came around, that team was kind of on the wane. Whereas this team, they're adding new strings to their bow with their coaches. Even the out half they had in the rugby championship, Sasha Feinberg Mongazulu, he looked really good, and a different kind of out half to the ones they've traditionally had. He's obviously injured now for a little bit of a period, so he's not available in November. But I think they're primed to be even better come 2027. I know there's some guys who are the wrong side of 30, but if they can keep them involved, like Leroux, Etzebeth, and some of these guys.
Totally. And I remember when Tony Brown came in at the start, and he I think had worked with Pollard before, he coached against him. I think it was at the 20s World Cup, I think I'm right in saying. And he said when he was back then, that he was such an unbelievable threat at attacking the line. He's like, I want to see him do more of that now. So you have a new guy with fresh ideas coming in and actually pushing guys like Andre Pollard, who we know on his day he's won 2 World Cups, an unbelievable 10, but he's now been asked to do something different, and they're not afraid to play Sasha Feinberg and Gamazulu as well, who looks like he is going to be the 10 for long term as well. So it keeps everyone on their toes, and to bring it full circle about Ireland, that's what I suppose we want from an Irish point of view as well, as guys coming in and refreshing up the team the whole time.
Yeah, so quick Ireland-Argentina predictions then to round things off. How do you think Friday will go?
I think Ireland win it comfortably. I think not to disrespect Argentina. I think they're a really good team going places, but I think Ireland, I expect them to bounce back. I've talked through all the areas where I think they will bounce back, and I think they're all achievable things. I don't think there's anything in terms of reinventing the wheel, cutting down the mistakes, that bit of accuracy at ruck time, and I think they get the momentum through the game, and I think we see the real Ireland team. I don't buy that this is some kind of slump. I don't think that. So yeah, I'm expecting them to bounce back.
I'm going with the slump vibes. I think it's going to be a tight one. I think I could see. If I'm sitting here, what we're going to be talking about next week, I could see us coming in being like, Ireland just about got over the line. It was very edgy. Argentina played some great stuff. They just about had enough. I think Ireland win narrowly, and I think
what's narrowly. So if I think
points.
Well, I'm thinking between
10 and 15,
10 and 12, something like that. 15's a lot.
I'm thinking 3 points.
I think they win it. 10 to 12 points for me, Ireland.
I'm going in the middle. I am very interested to see the team. Again, we're not going to get into it, but how much is Andy Farrell going to freshen it up? Is he going to give guys a chance? I would expect maybe not from the start, but from the bench. Like I said, this is a very dangerous Argentina team, so I can totally see where you're coming from. But I would expect a big response from Ireland. Look, I think that they haven't been too happy, I suppose, with the narrative and the coverage around the team, but we give them plenty of good stuff when they're going well, so it's up to them, like I said, to prove that this isn't a blip. And I'd be surprised with knowing Andy Farrell and what buttons he pushes, that if we don't get a big response this week, maybe around 7 points maybe for Ireland win.
Well, it's up to be a very exciting game. I'd like to thank Cian and Luke for joining me in studio on this week's episode of the Left Wing Podcast. On Friday night, Cian, Rudd and Sinead Kassan will be in the Aviva Stadium to record a post-match podcast, and myself and Luke will be here next week to digest all the action. In the meantime, you can subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or listen to us on the Irish Independent website. So until next time, thanks so much for listening, and goodbye.